Welcome, everyone, to the Penny Stamps Distinguished Speaker Series. My name is Christina Hamilton, the series director. Today, we present Barnaby Steele, who is an artist, designer, and founding force behind not Marshmallow Laser, not sure how that happened, but Marshmallow Laser Feast. I want to thank our series partners. We have today support from the Matai Botanical Gardens and Nichols Arboretum and the Michigan Institute for Data and AI in Society, along with our regular series partners, the U of M Arts Initiative, Detroit Public Television, PBS Books, and Michigan Public 91.7 FM. Well, fall is evaporating very, very quickly. Unbelievably, this is the last event of our fall season. I don't know how it happened. We're here. We are hard at work on finalizing details of the winter program, which will be announced in the next couple of weeks. You can check back our socials and our website, pennystampsevents.org. It should be up in early December. And you can mark your calendars now. We will return here to this stage on January 22nd. Before we begin tonight's program, I have some sad and difficult news to share with you all. Some of you may have heard already, one of our beloved theater organists, Andrew Rogers, has passed away. Yeah. This comes as a shock, as Andrew, he was such an ever-present person at our events here. He played for us here just 2 weeks ago. Sharing his remarkable talent and his warm spirit with all of us. He was someone who really took a genuine interest in others, and his ever-present smile, his generosity, and his musical talent will be missed. I have a few photos to share with you. You will remember exactly who I'm talking about. There he is at one of our events recently. Yeah, such a sweetheart. Oh, this one just kills me. Andrew was drawn to music from a very early age. Legend has it that at 12 months old, he was playing his family's stack of 78 RPM records on their phonograph. And he would choose the records, play them on the phonograph, and carefully put them back in their sleeves at 12 months old. His own musical gift did blossom early. By age of 7, he was performing on the accordion and was on a black and white TV talent show called Stairway to the Stars. His musical journey took him around the world. He performed and lectured internationally, scored and accompanied many silent films. I'm sure many of you saw him here doing that, and shared his passion with audiences near and far. There is going to be a memorial concert in his honor, celebrating his life and legacy, right here at the Michigan Theater on December 4th, which would be the Thursday after Thanksgiving. I hope many of you will join and remember the joy and the kindness that really defined him. A couple more pictures. This is Andrew at home. This is his home organ. Many of you may have seen him. He performed from there during the pandemic. Along with silent films for all of us. But yeah, Thursday, December 4th, here, you can celebrate his life with all of us. Anyway, back to the day at hand. Reminder, do silence your cell phones, please. There will be a Q&A here today. You'll see microphones at the ends of the aisles here on stands. So please do join us and ask wonderful questions. And now to our guest at hand, Barnaby Steele. Barnaby is renowned for crafting experiences that challenge us to see the invisible, feel the intangible, and imagine the impossible. As a leader of Marshmallow Laser Feast, he blends art, technology, and science into mesmerizing, immersive projects that traverse the boundaries of nature, human perception, and the digital frontier. From mind-bending virtual reality journeys through the lungs of trees to spectacular multisensory installations, his work inspires wonder and a new appreciation for the interconnected web of life on our planet. Marshmallow Laser Feast offers a unique perspective on collaboration and creativity in the digital age as a tool to awaken awe, empathy, and ecological consciousness. Please welcome Barnaby Steele.
Ahoy. Okay, thank you. Wonderful. Oh, it's a great pleasure to be here. So, yeah, peacocks. Has anyone seen a peacock recently? Peacocks. So I was on a farm with my my 7-year-old boy. He's super curious, and he's already like, oh, rainbow, love rainbows. There's lots of beauty in nature, but a peacock, outrageous beauty. It did the full display, and we're looking at those. Yeah, lots of these eyeballs. It's got the Bobby Dazzler on the top of its head, and as it slowly rotated, my boy was like, oh, look round its rear end. It's got these little white downy feathers, and they've got eyeballs on as well. And he said to me, where do peacocks come from? It's like, what is going on with these peacocks? And this thought came into my mind of like, yeah, so the female peacock is kind of like a deep time tuning fork for beauty, kind of like shimmering. Oh, she loves an eyeball on a feather. Ooh. And then given enough time, you end up with peacocks. And I thought the fact that we exist and peacocks exist means that essence of peacock is talking out of my mouth right now and looking at me through your eyeballs. It becomes a kind of the beauty that we see in a peacock is inherent in life. And so, in a way, what we do at Marshmallow Laser Feast is really dive into this sort of peacock juice, suckle it up, and we squirt it at people through virtual reality headsets, lasers, projectors. And I wanted to start this presentation today with the first project that we ever did. And this is, I don't know if any of you work with sound designers, but when you're trying to brief a sound designer, words are really difficult. So this was our sound brief for the first project we did together.
2, okay, ready, 4.
Knackered. It was a late night, that one. Thank you. And so when we started the company, you know, you've got to earn money, you've got to make a living. So we're doing brand work, but we all agreed to take low salaries and self-invest in our artwork. And that was the kind of ethos that set the company up. And yeah, I'm going to whiz through some of the early projects here. We were really interested in blurring the boundaries between virtual worlds and the real world. And for this one, we wanted to use like camera tracking in order to get perspective illusions. Couldn't do it this time, but on the next project, we used a Sony PlayStation Move to explore camera tracking. And I'll just dive into that one now. So what you're seeing here is take 50. It took a whole day of shooting to get one take that worked. So if you look carefully, you'll see a guy on a ladder with the projector that's doing the wings. He's kind of right at the top there. There he is, holding the projector to the top of the... So, yeah, playing around with all this technology, a little bit aimless, getting excited about all the possibilities, virtual reality, all of these things. And one of those brain farts, drones emerged for the first time, and we thought, oh, these drones are a little bit like an organ. You can sort of, maybe you could cap lights, fly the drones out over the audience, and do this kind of theremin-style visualization to organ music. And so we had this brain fart, and it was for the opening of an advertising festival. So I'll just dive into this one.
You need not fear the great unknown anymore. For soon all will be revealed.
So, extremely, thanks. Extremely stressful project, and a lot of that pressure was on Memo Acton, who was the co-founder of the company, and me and Robin, who are the creative directors, were constantly creating really difficult problems for Memo to solve. And so he left after that. He's a wonderful artist and went on to his new adventures. But it was kind of like a point in time where we were like, we were immersed, a little bit like this guy, like immersed in the technology, all the potential of new technology. And then we started having kids, and there was a kind of midlife crisis moment. So this is my midlife crisis talk, and now I'm going to take you on that journey of where we went next. So as is the way with life, it has a way of steering you. And I was on a plane on an overnight flight to Lima, and this old chap next to me, he leant over. I had a sequoia tree on my laptop, and he said, "Oh, the reason this tree is so old is because it breathes so slowly." And he went, "Ah." And so I was saying, "Oh, it's a fascinating guy." It was a little bit uncomfortable, but and this guy, it turns out, is a Tai Chi master, and he gave me some wonderful tips, and one of them was, keep this invisible compass in your pocket. And when you're making decisions about what you do as a job or how you act in the world, you just look at this little compass and you think, how do your actions affect people and the planet? So often it's negative, sometimes it's positive, but if you just check now and again, it's kind of a way of getting your bearing. And it really stuck with me. I was thinking, okay, so we've been exploring all this technology, but what does it all mean? Like, what is the deeper purpose? I've collected a few golden quotes that have really influenced me. This one by the discoverer of LSD, Albert Hofmann. Alienation from nature and the loss of the experience of being part of living creation is the greatest tragedy of our majestic era. It's a causative reason for ecological devastation and climate change. And so I felt like that was a bit of a reality. For me, I'm a kind of an urban dweller, but I've been spending a lot more time in nature and having this kind of deep reconnection. Some of the big influences, Richard Feynman, in fact, I've muted him because he talks for quite a long time, so I kind of paraphrase it. He's having a conversation with his artist friend, and his artist friend says, Richard, my eyeballs are more sensitive than yours are because I've trained them to look at details in a flower. So when I see a beauty that you can't see, Richard, because I'm a trained artist. And then Richard says, okay, interesting, but me as a scientist, I understand dimensions that you can't see. So the reason that the flower is red is because it's co-evolved with the eyeball of a pollinator. It asks this question, does the pollinator have an aesthetic sense like humans do? There's all the inner workings of the flower. It's suckling sunlight in order to translate that into its tissue and the body. So the more scientific understanding you have, the deeper the sense of connection, awe and wonder. And I think that's really true. That resonated with me, and that's become like one of the pillars of our work. Now, I was in a desert, and I had all my virtual reality gear. I was kind of really into virtual reality. I had it all there. I wanted to show some friends, so I needed to borrow some power of this guy that was setting up some musical instruments. And I said to him, I just want to pour a bit of power, plug this in. And he said, what is it? I said, well, these are lighthouses. They shoot these kind of lasers out, and then you've got the tracking on the camera. And he said to me, shh, and he stuck his finger on my lips. He said, tell me, what does an apple taste like? And an apple, it's a difficult one to answer. The scaffolding of language doesn't get close to the richness of the sensation. And so he said, just stop talking and let me try it. That was his point. But it's really interesting to think about the limits of language, especially when the possibilities of using new technologies to engage the senses open up a spectrum where scientific observation can be translated into spatial experiences. You can play with scent, touch, haptics, and allowing people access to these unseen dimensions, not through language, but through embodied experience. Also thinking about this relationship of technology to perception. So from the dawn of time, horses look like this when they're running to the naked eye. This is what they look like. But when you freeze, through the technology of the camera, you freeze time, you're able to see the way that the horses really run. And probably when you're asking somebody to draw a horse now, we're more familiar with this image of the frozen moment or slow motion replays on the TV, and that becomes embedded into our perception, and it becomes a way that we see the world. I mean, here through the lens of the telescope, looking up at the night sky, sorry, one second. Looking up at the night sky, you've got, to the naked eye, obviously it's a wonder, but through the telescope we start to reveal hidden dimensions of beauty. And on top of that, the stories that come back tell us that these nebula are the birthplace of planets. And so the whole sort of periodic table, the ingredients for life, come from these places. So in a way, we're looking back at the kind of womb of creation where we came from. Virtual reality arrived. This is my business partner, Robin. He hates me showing this video. We'll just watch it for a bit longer. One more. So virtual reality landed, and we had a great commission. So we were asked to create an artwork that was site-specific in a sculpture park. And so we were thinking, wouldn't it be interesting to kind of use these eyeballs and the ears, the virtual reality, to do a head swap, What would it be like to see a forest through the eyes of a dragonfly, or a mosquito, or a frog, or an owl? And how might that change your relationship to the forest afterwards? So this project, In the Eyes of the Animal, was created. I'll give you a little video of it now. So this was the first time we actually used LiDAR scanning. So that's a way of 3D capturing the forest environment. It's kind of like a three-dimensional photo. The way that the scanner actually works, it's like a laser pointer, that you can get a measurement from. It hits a mirror, and it spins round and round and round and orbits, so you end up with this huge point cloud. And then we bring that into our software to then, through collaboration with scientists, create this impression of what the forest looks like through the eyes of different species.
Well done.
My dad.
What a show. What a show. Unbelievable. Very clever.
Whenever he tries one of our new experiences, I'm like, Dad's in. We get the cameras set up to get his reaction. Very encouraging guy.
And the sound. The
thumping on the back. So on the back there is something called a sub pack. And as we were experimenting with all these ways of tickling the senses, it just so happened that when you become a dragonfly, you take off from a log. We did the vibration between the shoulder blades, and it feels like you've got wings. So we're often playing with these little touches that push you into a sense of immersion. So if you're familiar with this term umwelt, it's used to describe the sensory perspective of different organisms. And every organism has its own kind of flavor of reality, its way of sensing and experiencing the world. And so, like I was saying, for this project, we used the LiDAR scanning to capture the forest environment. That's the raw data. And then we worked with scientists to find out, okay, well, how does a mosquito sense the world? And there's interesting layers to it. So you've got it's got a sensitivity to CO2, which is something that it can kind of see from a distance. And if you think about that, there's the fluid dynamics of out-breath, and a forest visualized through CO2 is quite an interesting aesthetic. So we really dialed into that part of the project. And there's also cameras like this one that allow you to see what CO2 looks like. So this sort of lens of science as an insight into the project. And that led to this kind of visualization of the forest seen through carbon dioxide. Yeah, so here you get a sense of that piece. This is quite old now. This is like 10 years ago, this project, right at the beginning of virtual reality. Again, like using the sub-pack as a key ingredient. For the frog, there was an interesting, there we are, just go back one. Yeah, you can see here that you've got like ripples. So every time that the frog is doing echolocation, it was sending ripples through the surface of the water. And the frog vision as well it's got extra sensitivity to horizontal motions. That became part of the way that the frog sees the forest. And with an owl, it's quite interesting. Its eyeballs are cemented into its skull, which is why it's got such an amazing neck, so it can peer around in 360 degrees. And so we took that idea. You can think of it like having telephoto lenses stuck to your eyeballs, kind of binoculars. So there's an area of focus that's super sharp, and then you have blurry peripheral vision. And then obviously the headsets. It was quite interesting. We made the headsets in the forest, and there was an old lady in there. Actually, it was wonderful. She was just walking her dog, and she'd never tried virtual reality before. And she went into the experience, and she was like, "Where are my hands? Where are my hands gone?" And she was narrating the whole thing really loudly. And she said something that was priceless. She's like, "Oh, it reminds me of LSD in the 70s." I love that. So we had these kind of fresh-faced helmets. And so when we make these projects, Virtual reality is kind of a 360-degree medium, and often the projects unfold into large-scale projections. We're always thinking about how to immerse audiences through vision and sound. So this is a little case study of a new project still exploring umwelt.
Seeing Echoes in the Mind of a Whale is an immersive installation by Marshmallow Laser Feast, created in collaboration with scientists, researchers, and field experts, including the UPC Applied Bioacoustics Laboratory, natural history filmmaker Tom Mustel, and leading acoustic specialists. Bridging experiential art, marine ecology, and bioacoustics, the project explores the ocean through the perspective of whales, how they navigate the depths, map space through vibrations, and sense the world in ways we are only beginning to understand. To bring this project to life, the team collaborated with field experts to map the sensory world of whales. Through extensive research, in-depth interviews, and data analysis, they translated the physiology of whale perception into a speculative, immersive audiovisual experience. Blending hydrophone recordings, underwater videography, scientific research, and real-time computing, Seeing Echoes in the Mind of a Whale creates a multisensory bridge between human perception and the whale's world. The project unfolds in 3 layers: real-world hydrophone recordings of cetacean vocalizations captured from oceans worldwide and processed with advanced signal analysis to isolate and identify species. A simulated environment designed to visually interpret their auditory experience, translating the act of listening into a fluid, ever-changing visual world. A custom generative AI pipeline that extracts features from underwater footage, reconstructing volumetric data to form a coherent, immersive oceanic world. This data is then processed through a real-time rendering engine, where auditory signals dynamically sculpt the visuals. This allows audiences to experience sound as form, offering a glimpse of what it might feel like to see through sound, as whales do. To echo the way whales perceive, the installation fuses soundscapes with synchronized visual effects, rippling waves, shifting light, and echo-like patterns, creating a poetic depiction of echolocation as a form of vision. For the spatial audio design, a carefully curated selection of cetacean vocalizations is transformed into dynamic compositions based on their ecological occurrence and behavioral patterns, such as movement and speed in relation to one another. These vocalizations are then spatialized within the exhibition space to evoke the sensation of their movement, distance, and depth. The first iteration of the project debuted at the Design Museum of Barcelona in October 2024 as a 2-channel video installation with a 16.2-channel audio environment. This later evolved into an expanded iteration featuring a 12-channel immersive space with a 36.2-channel audio field, where visitors explored the varying depths of the ocean as they moved through the space.
Okay, so moving on to trees. There's something wonderful about trees because in a way they seem almost architectural to our senses, and time is this kind of barrier between the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom. So we just thought, if you could accelerate time and see through the bark of a tree, what would it look like? And so there's this wonderful quote by Dean Bonham: "The duration of the beat of a hummingbird's wing is as concealed to our sensory organs as is the drifting of the continents." So again, this was exploring virtual reality as a way of expanding perception and revealing a tree in a way that you couldn't sense in the real world. And so, again, working with scientists, we mapped the phloem and xylem inside a sequoia tree. So this tree is LiDAR scanned in Sequoia National Park. And it created this interesting idea that as the sun moves through the sky, there's more transpiration and the water gets sucked harder. So in a way, like that, the sun is kind of sucking water up through the tree like a straw. At night time, that flow eases. And so you have this kind of pulse that's driven by the movement of the sun. When we're creating these installations, we're always thinking, when you're in the virtual world, how you can use haptics and scent in order to interact with the experience. And so for this piece, you had to stick your head inside the tree, and we created these sculptural forms aligned with the LiDAR scan. And so as you push your head in there, you then get a kind of sappy smell. as you push through the bark. There you can see it. So we worked with a company called Centronics, who basically supplied a little, you can't quite see it there, but there's a little cube, a scent release system. So the Scentscape was an important part of that project. When we're building these pieces, you can think of it as ecosystem simulations. So we're designing these tools and workflows that then we can map onto new artworks. But at the core of it is a kind of scientific understanding that then gets translated into games engines and these kind of ecosystem workflows. Whoa. So the technology moved on. This is Ersan, who's my co-creator. So for the first time, you could do virtual reality without being cabled in. So this is the backpack PC. And this led to a new project called We Live in an Ocean of Air. And so we had 12 people in virtual reality all together. And this time they could walk around the sequoia forest. So it was an evolution of the previous work. You can see just on the front of the headset there, there's a breath sensor. So when you breathe out, you can see your out-breath flow into the air around you. Actually, look, what people are doing there is blowing on their hands because the airflow would map around the hands, so you sort of waft the particle flows. And so in this piece, your out-breath starts to flow into the plant kingdom, and it defines the inner structures of the plants. And then over time, your cardiovascular system is revealed. So you see other people as these branching beings. At the canopy of the tree, there's these rivers of oxygen that kind of umbilically connect to the audience members. And so there's this underlying reality that you're woven into relationship with trees through something as fundamental as breathing. And there's a real difference between understanding that conceptually and experiencing it. One sort of happy accident on this was people would sort of, they would think that they were with their girlfriend, but they'd end up with some complete stranger. But when you're in there, you reduce everyone to sort of branching beings. It's this kind of universal thing. You don't know how old people are, race and gender, it all becomes transparent. And so that was a kind of nice aspect. We've got a lot of good feedback on that. So maybe it's good to get lost and breathe with strangers. That project, mum and dad.
And I felt nourished. It's as if you're being nourished by the tree, and you see the interaction between yourself and the tree. It's incredibly moving to really understand the sort of the process of collaboration between you and nature.
We are completely at one with it. You are at one with it. You're not the boss. You're part of it.
Absolutely.
It's quite wonderful. It's terrific.
Oh yeah, I love my mum and dad. I hit the jackpot there. They're so encouraging. So I'd like to say that we came up with this workflow before we did the project, but actually we did it afterwards. But it has become a kind of model for the way we think about timelining, because you're having to think about storytelling through all these different dimensions. So you've got obviously an emotional arc, but the olfactory narrative is really key. And for this piece, we again went back to the sap, but we had fans in the ceiling. So there was a happy accident when we were first doing tests. I set the tree up next to an aircon unit, and that just happened to align with the bark. And that little tickle of wind that aligns with the virtual world was really powerful. And we got a bit excited, as we tend to do. So we ended up with 32 fans in the ceiling, and with this whole scent system, and it created a kind of column of air where the tree was. So when people went in there, they got the sap and the feeling on the face. All those little touches make it really hard to tour because it's very expensive, loads of custom electronics. And also it didn't tour that well because COVID happened, and this piece was basically making breath visible. So that was it was like, yeah, you can see everyone's breath. You can breathe on people. It flows around. You can see it go into their lungs. Yeah, look, it's going into their body. Yeah, that was a bit of a shame. So we went to the Amazon. I'll talk more to this, but our process of going to real places capturing the beauty and then creating a digital experience that allows us to see unseen dimensions, but also make a connection to a real place. I'll touch on that a bit later. So one of our sound, actually long-term collaborator, he works with us on developing concepts, but is a wonderful composer called James Bully. There he is there. So he was using hydrophones and piezo microphones to sample the forest in these exotic spectrums. And he was like, oh, bonzo, yeah, check this out. So you put a microphone on a leaf, and he's like, each leaf is like a differently tensioned drum skin awaiting the impact of a raindrop. I'm like, oh, okay, James, that's really next level detail. So he's there waiting for drops to land on the leaves and going around and sampling these different leaves. But all of that work actually is really valuable in the end, because it means that when we're creating these artworks, for example, this one has 24 speakers. If you want to explore something like rain, you can position all of the ingredients really richly. And so the experience of the piece is all about drawing you into this expanded perception and sense of presence. Can't see this so well here, but again, it's exploring the inner systems of the tree. It sort of raises this idea of a tree has got much more in common with a river estuary than anything static. And in a way, they're these like ancient breathing beings that are rivers of sunlight. They're like suckling sunlight, turning this cosmic energy into the biological energy that powers nearly every living thing. And so seen that way, they are really quite remarkable, and we exist via them. So this idea of the tree is something we keep coming back to, but we rarely get an opportunity to situate the artwork next to the actual tree that we scanned. So this piece called Of the Oak was at Kew Garden this summer, and we 3D scanned the oak tree and then the screen, which initially we had a few protests because it's essentially an advertising billboard right in the middle of a park. It doesn't go down too well, but actually the dialogue between the digital and the real became really interesting, because it's not about representing the oak tree as it stands. We wanted to see through into the mycelial networks. You've got all of the under the ground systems. We scanned it multiple times, so we captured the tree in all 4 seasons. And so what you're seeing in the artwork is a whole year of the tree kind of accelerated into a 12-minute animation piece. Yeah, and this is a little clip of that there. One of the interesting parts of this project is collaborating with the scientists at Kew Garden, who are super passionate, and they're like really geeky and really into the little niche. In a way, you can think of them as they're kind of burrowing into these little dark corners of reality, and what they're witnessing, hardly anyone else knows about. And so it's very interesting to kind of take that insight and then translate it into an artwork that's much more accessible. Here's some of the process. So we're using hydrophones to sample dimensions of sound that you can't hear. There's James at work. To get the root structures under the ground, we use ground-penetrating radar, and that just basically gives you an image of higher density areas of water, and because the roots are full of water, you end up with a really amazing image, which you can see in the top right there. And that becomes the basis for then what we create in Houdini, which is our 3D software. One of the scientists had done a study of an oak tree, and they counted 2,300 different species that live in relationship to an oak tree. It's interesting because names are really handy when you want to pick something out, but they also kind of create a container and limit what that thing is. So the word oak actually contains all of these other names. So we have that on the back side of the artwork. And so you can really think of an oak tree as a web of relationships. And more recently, we're in discussions with Moth, the More Than Human Rights Project. And Cesar Rodriguez is a wonderful human, and he's basically going to the high courts to get legislation put through to protect forests, to protect rivers, to get legal rights. And this is an area that we're really interested in. It's like, how can our artwork actually have real-world impact? And this is a relationship that's just started, so we're really excited to be doing some projects with them. Does anyone remember the TV being wheeled into the classroom? Do you remember that? So it got me thinking, obviously we love a bit of virtual reality, and I was imagining you could take over the school gym and like get a group of school kids in there, so they're all in virtual reality. Like, come on, kids, yeah. Okay, so they're in a forest. It's all really beautiful, and then they're instructed to lie down on their backs on the forest floor, and then they're going to take their last breath. They're like, oh, okay, take my last breath. Then time starts to accelerate, whoosh, day, night, blah, 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 until you get to this kind of day-night cycle that hums a little bit like when you film a car wheel and it starts to kind of go backwards. You know that moment? So I'm imagining you sort of enter this like mushroom time, this shimmering, and then mushrooms flower through their chest, and their body kind of unspools a bit like a bath bomb. So they kind of like, it's orchestral as well, like the bacterial blooms, the kind of maggots have their own sort of flying out of the body. So it could be a really beautiful musical experience, but it's basically looking at, where is the bookend? Obviously, your awareness ends the moment that you die, but your body just keeps on flowing. And in a way, you can think of life from the moment it started, just never stopped. It just keeps becoming other things. And so to witness that would be, I think it'd be pretty good. Get those school kids in there. So one of our more commercial projects that we're using to, the studio sort of sustains itself still to this day between art and commercial, but the commercial projects have become much more aligned with our artwork. And so a spa in Germany called Wund invited us to create a series of meditations rooted in forest bathing. And so we created this custom piece of furniture. In the center, you've got a scent release system. There's a big subwoofer built in. This is a kind of lily pad shape. If I can show you here, the people lie down with the heads in the middle. And we took this idea of lying on a forest floor and witnessing the day-night cycle, but seeing dimensions to the forest that you can't see with your naked eye. And so for this piece, we did quite a lot of research into the science of forest bathing, which is something that's been studied a lot in Japan. And there's all sorts of interesting papers. So one of them talks about birdsong. The absence of birdsong creates slightly higher levels of anxiety, because in nature, when the birds stop singing, it means that there's an attack about to happen. There's other really strange papers about fractal structures, so like the branching patterns of trees, and how that essentially calms the nervous system. Very interesting. And even down to things like the movement of leaves create a hypnotic effect. So it's the same whether you're looking at water or murmurations of starlings. We took this idea of the hypnotic quality of motion and amplified it. So in this piece, time accelerates, movement slows down, and we sort of put people into this really deep state of hypnosis in a way. And so since this project opened, it's been the most popular, because you can do a massage or you can go for a sauna. It's been the most popular piece at the spa for the last 2 years. So we're super chuffed with that. Right, I want everyone just to close their eyes for a moment. Now, put your fingers on your wrist and feel your pulse. Okay? Now, just try and imagine the fluid dynamics of blood flow through your heart. Just try and get a mental picture of that. Okay, so the way that the blood is flowing through your heart. Okay, so now if you open your eyes, this is what blood flow through the heart looks like. It's driven by a medical data set from the Fraunhofer Institute, and it was one of those projects where it's a bit like you've got this pen pal that you've never met. Like, your heartbeat is so familiar, and even when you're in the womb, your mum's heartbeat, this heart the size of a VW camper van, is throbbing away. So this rhythm is about as familiar as it gets, but it's through the lens of science that you can actually see it for the first time. And we were like, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful to go for a walk with your mates, maybe with your dog, and wander through the human cardiovascular system at the scale of a forest. So really high-resolution medical data. So that brain fart took 4 years to make, and it was really difficult. And we got close a few times. I'll show you some of the... we made a little documentary about it, actually, which I'll show you in a second. So this is the kind of preview, thinking of what would it be like to breathe yourself into your own body and go on the journey of oxygen. You know, the previous work we were doing was sort of your out-breath into the forest, and this is the out-breath of the trees into you. I love this Alan Watts quote. A living body is not a fixed thing, but a flowing event, more like a flame or a whirlpool. And so when you start to think about your body not as something static, not as something that's sort of contained within your skin, but as a river, then it suddenly opens this idea of where do you end and begin. You know, you've got sunlight under your skin, the water continually flows. Everything that sustains you is relationship. We're woven into relationship. So this
Put your finger on your wrist and find your pulse.
You don't need to do that
This
again.
beat is with you every moment of your life. Imagine the shape of your heart, the pulsating form which is the foundation of human life. 100,000 kilometers of blood vessels run through the human body, pumping 7,000 liters of blood a day. The beauty of this process is the foundation for a series of collaborations between Marshmallow Laser Feast and Fraunhofer Mewis, using medical imaging data to reveal the familiar landscape of our bodies in ways never seen before. The researchers at the Fraunhofer Institute for Digital Medicine, Mewis, develop software systems for image and data-based early detection, diagnosis, and therapy. To enable a broader audience to engage with rapid developments in digital medicine, they create sci-art installations, both independently and through collaborations with artists. One powerful research tool Mewis uses is the MR scanner, which delivers high-resolution 3D images from inside the human body. This makes it possible to detect diseases without invasive procedures. In one research project, the scientists achieved something remarkable. Using the MR data and their in-house software, they were able to digitally reconstruct patients' blood flow trajectories. The Mewis researchers are deeply fascinated by the beauty of the now visible blood flow and want to share it with the world outside science. The result is a 3D film showing the speed and direction of blood flow in a human heart. This film inspired London-based artist collective Marshmallow Laser Feast, MLF. MLF's work is rooted in the transformative potential of immersive experiences, often employing the knowledge, methods, and data of scientific institutions as a lens through which to expand perception. The artists were exploring the idea of perspective shifts as a way of igniting a sense of awe and wonder, similar to the overview effect astronauts describe when seeing the Earth from space. MLF asked the question, is it possible to create a biological overview effect by shifting people's perspective on the ecosystem of the human body? MLF and Mewis dived into an extensive collaboration, sharing ideas and techniques to make the invisible visible, the starting point of which was the human heart. The scientists' data described the speed and direction of the blood flow through the 4 chambers of the heart and the aorta. MLF built a full digital model of a cardiovascular system.
We got a bit carried away, to be
and
honest.
ran particle simulations through it,
It's a bit much.
branching out from there into the rest of the human body. The tree-like lungs, where oxygen meets the blood. The brain, where highly detailed MR data from MEVIS revealed the symmetry of meandering arteries. And on into the limbs, where branching algorithms were used to extend detail into capillaries and into the fingers. To the tips of the toes. Fluid simulations projected how air flowed through the mouth and nostrils and into the lungs. The result is a series of immersive installations. The Tides Within Us uses screens as windows into the world beyond the limits of our senses, allowing audiences to peer beneath the skin, looking beneath our notions of age, race, and gender to reveal universal human truths. The second project, Evolver, is a collective virtual reality experience that drops audiences deep inside the landscape of the body, following the flow of oxygen through our branching ecosystem to a single breathing cell. Through this transcendental narrative, it becomes clear that breath sparks life and connects us to the natural world through the cycle of respiration. Where does the living body begin, and where does it end? By revealing the tidal rhythms of oxygen flowing through the human ecosystem, these projects challenge notions of the boundaries between us and our environment. We flow into the world, and the world flows into us.
So, thank you. So there's nothing new about the stuff that we're doing, and I love this book, Existence, A Story by David Hinton, because he's using this one Chinese landscape painting as a metaphor for all of existence. He actually describes it as existence tissue. And in the story, he's basically saying, you start with the blank canvas, and then you have the ink, and as the ink is put onto the paper, from nothing emerges something, and the branching structures of the plants, the mountain landscapes, the human being are all rendered from the same pigment, so there's no separation. And there's also this act of painting yourself from the kind of God perspective that takes it from that first-person view to you being inseparable from nature. And I thought, in a way, this is kind of what we're exploring. We're like doing these ecosystem simulations to paint a picture of existence as a web of relationships where everything flows into everything else. And so for me, that's a really beautiful marriage of where like science aligns with art, but there's also a kind of spiritual kind of truth to it that is made visible through the lens of science. I think these things, they're all like fingers pointing at the same moon. So this is a recent piece. Obviously, we've been exploring breath in the body, breath in the tree, and this one was like, I wonder what it would look like through these NASA data sets. And so we found this beautiful data set, which is basically just looking at wind. And there's this lovely David Abram quote where he says, the atmosphere is the co-creation of all breathing beings. And it's this kind of like underlying tissue that flows through all things. And so for this piece, we encourage people to breathe in with the day and out with the night. And so you have that experience of breath, but you can see it on a global scale. This led to this question. We were like, I wonder if you can see photosynthesis from space. So we're ferreting around in this insane data that NASA just put out there in the public. And we got this amazing data set, which is CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere. And so what you're seeing here is, so there's a kind of pulse to it. That's a day-night cycle, so it's quite quick. Boom, boom, boom. And what you'll see is that the forests emit more carbon dioxide at night because of respiration, and in the daytime they absorb more, and it creates this really cool pulse. So the forests are in red, so you can kind of see where they are on the globe, and then obviously the fluid dynamics in the atmosphere is the CO2. So it's not really an Earth pulse, but it is a visualization of the ebb and flow of carbon dioxide on a planetary scale. Oh, bit of a meaty quote, this one. I really wanted to read it because I love David Abraham, and but I'm rubbish at reading. I go all sort of, I'll give it a try. Our bodies have formed themselves in delicate reciprocity with the manifold textures, sounds, and shapes of inanimate earth. Our eyes have evolved in subtle interaction with other eyes, as our ears are attuned by their very structure to the howling of wolves and the honking of geese. To shut ourselves off from these other voices, to continue by our lifestyles to condemn these other sensibilities to oblivion of extinction, is to rob our own senses of their integrity and to rob our minds of their coherence. We are human only in contact and conviviality with what is not human. Nailed it. I love that. So for this new project, we're exploring how the senses work. Obviously, our senses are incredible, and it's like it is the root that sort of weaves us into all of these relationships. You know, there's not an experience that doesn't come via our senses, but what actually happens under the skin? Like, what if you could go from a bird song in a bird's mouth and then travel through the ear? You'd get to the eardrum's moving like this. Then it's pushing on these little bones that are Morse coding the bird's song onto the cochlea. Everything you've ever heard is Morse coded by these bones. Then in the cochlea, there's these like kelp forests that are wafting around depending on the frequency. Then there's the electrochemical signal. In fact, the bit, I'm researching this project at the moment, the bit that blew my mind is the kelp forest, the little cilia hairs. They've almost got, you know, on the kettle where you lift the lid, it's like, and the pressure difference does that. There's these like little valves attached to the hairs. So when the hairs move, they go, and the pressure gradient, little raspy, is what creates the electrochemical signal. And it's like, wow, it's all so bonkers. So on this journey of birdsong into the brain, when you arrive at the moment where it kind of flowers into your conscious awareness, we asked some of the scientists, well, what does consciousness look like? Like, what is that kind of, is there something in nature? And they said murmurations are a really good way to think about it because it's a volume, and this big web of neurons is constantly passing messages from one to the next through the volume. So it's interesting to think that on that journey of birdsong into the brain, you arrive at a pattern that is out there in nature. As part of the research as well, there was this wild bit of data, which is that when you recall a memory, you basically relive it. So you've got a memory as a branching structure there, and you've got the kind of mud flow, and each time you recall the memory, it changes the shape of the riverbed slightly, and that's why memories that you recall the most deform the most. Pretty wild. Oh, I got these, this one tickled me. I was thinking, wait a sec, so if you experience your reality through this kind of lasagna of all past experiences, then what does that lasagna look like? And maybe like a trauma is like a lump of mozzarella. Lots of questions. So we're at the end now. I just wanted to wrap things up with this wonderful quote by Terence McKenna. Nature is not our enemy to be raped and conquered. Nature is ourselves to be cherished and explored. Thank you.